And now, more Utalk. Now.
Well, let me tell everybody who you are. I mean, it's session drummer, live drummer, writer, vocalist, award-winning producer, and the list goes on and on.
Well, thank you for the very nice introduction. And yeah, I stay busy in the music business. And I think actually having all those skills helped keep me busy in a business that's very, let's face it, the music business is not a very forgiving business. And it's hard to stay working in it for a very long time. And I've managed to be working in it for, I don't know,
a long time.
Years. A long time. Yeah, almost 40 years. So. Yeah, it's a long time.
It really is amazing, Ken, because, I mean, you've played a wide spectrum of genres. I mean, you've played with bands like Fifth Angel, which we'll come back to in a minute, House of Lords, Accept, the legendary Alice Cooper, Flotsam and Jetsam. I mean, it's amazing how you've been able to keep things going in different situations. And I mean, I appreciate you taking time to be with us, because I know this is kind of a last minute thing. And last night we were, emailing and texting back and forth and trying to make this happen. And I got this message from you. Hey, I'm sorry, I just got out of the studio. And I thought, man, this is so cool. This guy is so busy and he's taking time to be with us on the show. So I really appreciate it.
Well, you and I go way back, Steve. You and I go back years and years. So
we do.
It's a pleasure to be on here, and thanks for having me.
Oh, are you kidding? It's our privilege, man. Hey, how did you start in your first band? What was the first band? How did you get started? I mean, you didn't just pick up a pair of sticks and go, okay, I'm going to play drums.
No, well, to some degree, I kind of did.
Really?
People always talk about drums or an instrument, and they say, did you pick the instrument or did the instrument pick you? And I have to say, in this instance, the drums definitely picked me. When I was very young, I was, banging around on pots and pans, and they used to have to take pencils away from me in school. And so when you got into, I think it was sixth grade, and, you would be able to learn an instrument. And they said, what would you like to play? And it was like, no question there. It was drums all the way. So that's sort of how it started. And then as far as my first band, I was always in bands where everybody else was much older than me. And in Fifth Angel, which is really my first band, Ted and Ed saw me play when I was in junior high.
I love it.
And they were in high school and I was in junior high. They went to a talent show and they saw me play there, and they said, hey, we'd like to have you come down and jam, with our band. And their band was really good. I mean, they were great. And that actually became Fifth Angel. That was
cool.
That was Ted, Ed, and myself out of that group. And then obviously James Bird was a very important addition to that band. But that was where I learned so many things. I mean, we did our best to make an amazing album. We raised $10,000 on our own back in 1985 dollars, which is that's probably the equivalent of like $30,000 today.
Yeah.
And we went into a recording studio named Steve Russo Productions, which was in Seattle. We were all from Seattle. And we recorded the first album, and we ended up getting picked up by a label called Shrapnel. And Shrapnel leased the album to a small company out of the Netherlands called Roadrunner Records. And
interesting.
And if you don't know who that is now, they're one of the biggest rock labels on the planet. They have Slipknot and a bunch of other hugely. I think they have Nickelback, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
I mean, they're just a hugely successful label now. But back then, I remember talking on the phone with Cees Wessels, and I was a teenager, and we're talking about points and all these different things. And it's just funny looking back on that. I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I was negotiating with Shrapnel and talking to Cees Wessels, and it was really kind of an exciting time.
That's pretty cool. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm going to go back to something that you said. They leased your album. Was that common back then? Is it common today?
Well, when I say lease, it's really a license. Shrapnel was the owner of the masters, and then they licensed it to Roadrunner, which was distributed by CBS. And so they took the album, and then the album started getting a lot of attention in Europe. As a matter of fact, Kerrang! Magazine started talking about it. There was a lot of hype around the record. And we were selling more than a lot of the bands that were on major labels. And so we got a call from Epic Records in New York City, and they basically came out, went to a rehearsal, and made sure we could play, I guess. And then at that point, they signed us to back in that day, this was a big deal. It was about a $21 million deal over 7 albums. And
whoa.
Yeah, I mean, well, it sounds like a lot to people, and they go, oh, tons of money, but they don't realize it's sort of like, your first deal is every album escalates in terms of the fees, and by the time you get to your 7th record, you're getting $1 million, to record the album, and then a promotional budget of this and that. So it's always at their option to pick up the record, and we ended up doing 2 albums with Epic Records before the whole grunge thing hit, and then that's a whole nother story. But grunge sort of pushed all of the existing metal stuff sort of off the plate, so to speak, and that sort of was a dark time for the band. The band pretty much broke up in 1990, 91, and then really didn't do anything else until 2010.
Whoa. It's interesting that you say grunge kind of pushed it off, because you guys were from Seattle area, which is kind of the home of grunge.
Yes, it was very ironic. We started in Seattle, but we were part of the metal scene that was like Queensryche, Metal Church, Fifth Angel. There was a band called The Heir Apparent. There was another band, Q5, who Floyd Rose was the original guitar player in, the developer of the Floyd Rose tremolo arm.
Sure.
And, so there was a little bit of a metal scene happening in Seattle. But yeah, when the grunge scene kind of kicked in, a lot of the metal bands lost their deals, and it sort of was an odd time for music. It's one of the rare times in the music business where one style of music, it's like if you weren't grunge, everybody hated you. The fans were no longer following you. So it was a weird time for us, that's for sure.
Well, it's interesting, too, thinking about metal with you, because that's been kind of a part of the core for you all these years, in just who you've been playing with, what you've played, that kind of thing. But I didn't know that, kind of the behind the scenes, what happened at that point in time, in that with grunge. But I mean, grunge was so huge. Nirvana, you start looking at all these people, that were just, they were killing it every place.
Yeah, grunge.
Wow.
Grunge definitely took over. And the only thing that I object to is, in music history, there's never really been a time where, labels just went, hey, you're over, you're done. And really in that era, I can't tell you, it wasn't just bands. It was even producers.
Really?
A friend of mine, Michael Wagner, who sold 60 million albums with bands like Extreme and White Lion and Ozzy Osbourne and Megadeth and Metallica. And in the 90s, he went through a period where it was very difficult for him to get work, just because he had produced those types of products, and nobody wanted anything to do with it. It was sort of, the only analogy I can think that's similar is when at the end of the beginning of the early 80s, when everybody hated disco and people were burning disco records. That's the only analogy I can think of that fits what happened with like metal and rock. Like if you weren't grunge, you were just out of there, as far as the industry was concerned. And it was very unfortunate. It was very unfortunate.
Yeah, it really, and the word persistence keeps coming to me with, if you're going to be in this business, man, you got to be able to ride what's coming and foresee what's coming and almost have like an alternate direction to go. People don't realize it. You can look at some of the huge concerts, that are happening now, and the artists, and it's a whole different world, and there's always somebody, I know, having not achieved what you have, but having done some stuff in the business, there's always somebody behind you that wants to grab that position you've got, and we could spend hours talking about this. Who are some of your drumming influences?
Well, I'm actually going to be doing a series called Three Drummers, and I'd say certainly I've been influenced by a great number of players. There's so many incredible players out there, but I'd say, if I want to say who is the most influential to me, I had a great teacher up in Seattle. His name was Dick Stensland, and he exposed me to progressive rock, things like Return to Forever and Yes, and he exposed me to Latin and jazz and Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson, and so much great music. I really owe it to him. But I would say my main influences, Buddy Rich to me was probably, like I always joke about this now, I say, if Buddy Rich were coming out today, he'd be a metal player. And, and here's why. Because Buddy Rich was all about speed and precision. And that was his whole deal. And if you look at what's pushing the envelope today, with songs at 240 beats a minute or 300 beats a minute and all these blast beats and stuff, If Buddy Rich was young today, I think he would probably be a metal drummer. So he was a big influence. Certainly Neil Peart, which has been a huge influence on probably. I'd say Buddy Rich and Neil Peart and John Bonham are probably the three most influential drummers of all time. And those are really the three that I loved in terms of, trying to glean things from.
Sure.
And I tried to be like an amalgamation of all of these guys. Like I wanted the composition of Neil Peart, I wanted the speed and precision of Buddy, and I wanted the groove and feel of John Bonham. So like all amazing players, and they're completely different. Yes. And my goal was to sort of, fuse all these guys together into one player. So that's what I tried to do.
Amazing. It's funny because you and I have some similar influences, and I had a teacher named Bill Naraki, because I came from the Bay Area, and he was first call for sessions and everything, and great. I mean, he exposed me to a lot of different things, and one of his words of wisdom always was, Russo, learn something from every drummer you hear. And of course, my attitude stunk. I was, a hotshot high school drummer. And I said, come on, Bill. I said, some of these guys can't eat their way out of a paper bag. And he goes, dude, your attitude stinks. He said, maybe it's the way they tune their drums or whatever. But, I mean, you look at Buddy. Buddy was absolutely a big influence on my life, and just an amazing player. And Neil, the professor, and John, I mean, it's just, that's interesting, an interesting amalgamation of putting those guys together. And I'm hearing you play as you're saying this, going, yeah, you did it. And I think,
I don't know if anybody can ever sit back and go like, I did it or whatever. But I think, certainly in my way, I tried to, take what I loved about each player and try to incorporate that into what I do. And certainly, when you talk about influences, there's been other influences as well. Steve Gadd, Steve Smith, Tommy Aldridge. There's lots of other players for different reasons. But I like what your drum teacher said. Especially when you look at great players. There's always something you can learn. There's always, something that you can learn, especially I think if you're looking at great players. I kind of think like you do a little bit, where I'm not sure you're going to learn something from every single player. Yeah. But certainly, if you look at the best of the best, and that's, I'm excited about people that are the best of the best in anything. I mean, to be honest with you, regardless of what field they're in, if they're in television or if they're in music or if they're in film, or if they're in business. I have a friend who's very successful in business, and I'm always excited to learn from people that are the best of the best, because there's an attitude and there's a mentality that goes along with these people that you can apply to different areas of your life.
And what I hear you saying is something that I try to do, being a lifelong learner. What can I learn from this person? Having conversations, I love to have conversations on the show because I learn something from every guest we have. And then conversations you and I have had over the years doing different things. And it's an attitude that I think is a healthy attitude to learn and to grab some things. Now, another drummer just came to my mind who was very influential for me was David Garibaldi.
Sure, yeah, fabulous player.
Yeah, amazing player. And here I am, this little junior high student when I was introduced to him and got to sit, behind him on the stage sometimes. And he had this little tiny kit, and he just made it cook. I mean, that guy just made it. It was amazing to me. But I want to come back to what you just said about learning something from everybody. I think we can pick something here, we can pick something there. But if we, like you said, no matter what career they are, we can learn from somebody who rides horses and raises horses. There's something in that we can take, and I think it's a great attitude to have, not just for drummers, like you said, but picking up from everybody. Okay, what was it like playing to packed out coliseums with Alice Cooper?
Well, honestly, I look back on that time with tremendous fondness, and I will say that people always go, well, what was, a moment for you, that was perhaps, like if you wanted to pinpoint a moment. And for me, before touring with Alice, the biggest place that I had played was about 3,000 people, the Paramount Theater in Seattle. Okay. And it's a beautiful theater. Yeah. It was an awesome venue. But I think on it was our fifth show with Alice. that I played Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, which was 22,000 people, sold out 2 nights. And it was broadcast live on MTV in front of about 20 million more people. So, and the weird thing is I was not nervous. I was excited. I mean, I was like a pig in slop. I mean, I was having the greatest time of my life. Because as a kid, I had envisioned playing Coliseums since I was a kid. And when it happened, I was like, I am finally here. You know, I've finally arrived where I'm supposed to be. And so I was not nervous. I was totally ready for it. I had the greatest time of my life. And honestly, like years later, you know, and there's other tours and there's bigger, you know, like maybe things that are more important in terms of, you know, your record and your chart position. And but in terms of the fun factor, I think the first time you do something like that, it's definitely the biggest rush. And I think I look back on that as probably one of the most fun times in my career. You know, I've played Reading Festival, I played Wacken, I played, you know, tons of these huge festivals and everything. And those are all important things to me. I mean, those are all things that I hold dear. But certainly that first time, you know, playing to an audience like that, you know, it's just, you know, and an icon like Alice, you know, what an incredible. You know, you knew he would be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at some point. So even then you knew that.
Which is crazy.
And what a tremendous showman. So, I mean, what was it like? It was one of the best times of my life.
You know, it's amazing when you say you knew back then he was going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And have you, by the way, have you been to the 2 places in Arizona that he's raising up young musicians and doing some competition and stuff? I am just very impressed with that.
Yeah, it's Alice Cooper Solid Rock, and I actually I've done a fair amount of work down there. I've been a judge at a lot of they have a lot of events where they'll have young artists play. And I've acted as a judge on a number of occasions. I actually went and did a drum clinic down there that raised a bunch of money for the foundation.
Nice.
And so actually some of the people that help run it are very good friends of mine. And, you know, they'll call me from time to time to come in and do some different things. But, yeah, the work he's doing with young people is just amazing. And really giving them an opportunity to, you know, learn about music and recording. They have studios at the facilities, and you know, and it's all free, and they have people that give lessons, you know, whether it's guitar or drums or piano or dance. I mean, it's really just an incredible organization for helping kids.
It really is. When I was there last fall, we were waiting to meet with somebody, and a buddy of mine are sitting there, and this younger guy comes in, and we start a conversation with him. He's homeless, and he had this whole other look of what, you know, this meant to him. And it's a cool place to hang out, and you're welcome. And I thought, you know, that's a whole nother thing that Alice and the rest of the guys probably never envisioned. But here's this kid living on the streets coming in, and it's an awesome place. And I think music has why is music important to us?
Well, I think it's because it touches us emotionally. I mean, I think when whatever type of music you're listening to, whether it's classical or country or rap and hip hop or metal or jazz, you know, there's an emotion that's stirred up within you, and you know, you tend to gravitate to music that's going to make you feel what the music is exuding. So I just think it's all about emotion. And when you think about the great gifts in life that God has created, you know, things like art and music, you know, are certainly at the top of the list. I mean, if you take art and music out of our world, it's going to be, you know, a very different world than what we have now. So I think it's, you know, music is definitely extremely important. I think it connects people.
Yep.
I think it crosses all barriers. It crosses economic barriers. It crosses cultural barriers. It joins people together. I think it's an amazing force.
It really is. I'm sitting there thinking of different places. I've been in 32 countries, you know, doing events and school things and stuff like that. And the drums are always part of it. And, you know,
now you're getting into a different discussion, and that is, why are drums the coolest instrument known to man? And I will back this up scientifically now.
Okay, good.
And I will say, I'm going to go on the record, drums are the coolest instrument known to man. Take any kind of music, take the drums out, it's going to be horrible. Take country music, take the drums out, what do you have? You know, take the drums out of rap and pop, you have nothing. Take it out of rock, take it out of metal, you don't have anything. So, that groove, that thing that gives us the emotion that I was talking about, that largely comes from the rhythm and from the drums. And so I'm saying it, half jokingly, but it's really true. I mean, the only music style that I think can exist outside of that rhythmic force is classical music. Classical music, and it's even used in classical music. But I'm just saying, like, that's one style of music you may be able to get away without having drums, and that's the only one I can think of. Everything else is very drum-centric, very rhythm-centric, and I think it's really essential to how people feel the music.
Oh, absolutely. It's I have a handful of students that I teach, and I enjoy it because it keeps me sharp. It gives me an opportunity to invest in somebody younger. And I'm really big on saying, hey, guys, I want you to listen to the rhythm of life. Come back next week for the lesson and tell me, where did you hear rhythm in just everyday life? And it's fascinating to see some of the things they come back with. Obvious things, but I had to go to a cardiologist for basic testing. The doc says, hey, I want you to go in once a year, blah, blah. And I said, okay. So they did this deal, and the technician kept turning the sound on and off, and I'm hearing this rhythm, and it's my heart, but it's not the normal, beat of the heart. And I'm going, I'm digging this. This is really cool, So I go back and I get the, you're okay, you're fine. And I said, well, hey, can I get a copy of what you guys recorded now? Sorry, I can't do it. He goes, well, go on YouTube. So I'm going to send my students now to YouTube to listen to this, because rhythm is the core of life. Without any rhythm, there is no life. Well, thank you for validating. I was not planning on that, but that's good, because now it's out there. It's in front of the world. It's going to go beyond global. It'll go intergalactic, I'm sure. The importance of drums, why they are the best. And, another thing we could say is, I don't see people driving down the street playing a clarinet or playing a keyboard. They're playing the dashboard as if they're playing a drum. I mean, it's right there basic. And you can just watch people go to Lowe's or Home Depot and go to the paint section, and you see people playing those paint cans, which you probably did, because I know I did when I was younger. My family didn't want to take me anyplace because I'm going to play all this stuff, Right. It's crazy, but we just got to be honest. I mean, drummers are the best. We really are,
Clearly.
I love it. Hey, if people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, what's your website?
sonicfish.com, or you can just go to kenmary.com. But probably, if you really want to stay, updated, the most recent information, I would go to Instagram. I'm at Ken K. Mary Official, or you can go to Facebook at Ken Mary 1, the number one. Number one, because drums are number one.
No, they are number one. We've established that.
So there's that. But that would be the best way to know exactly, what I'm currently doing. And it's always a little delayed anyways. Like I'm really not a great social networker. I tend to, always be like a little bit late, and then I'll post something, but you can certainly see what I've been up to.
But you've been putting some great stuff up there, because I follow you, and we'll put all those things into the notes for this show, because people need to see what you're doing. And now talk to me about, I'm going to make sure that I say this correctly, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Well, you almost said it correctly. It's the band name is Flotsam and Jetsam, and most people don't understand what that is. But if you were in the Navy, you would know what that is. Okay. Like when a submarine or a ship is sunk, and then there are certain fragments that are floating, it's called Flotsam and Jetsam. So that's kind of where the
okay, so it's from. Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah, and so it's a term that used to be, I guess, somewhat common in World War II. Mm-hmm. But a lot of I think it's a really rough name for these days, because nobody knows what that is.
Yeah.
And when I tell people the name of the band, Flotsam and Jetsam, they're like, Flintstones and Jetsons, or what is it? Like what's the name of the band again? It's kind of it's a very interesting name, but it is a little tough to get that one across.
Well, I'm glad I know how to say it now. I mean, I've known you all these years. You guys have done some big shows in Europe, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, the band does much better in Europe than they do in the United States. And, we had the last two albums have done, I think, the best that the band has ever done in terms of chart position, in terms of video play, in terms of, the response. It seems to be, fans are really into it. And if I had to describe, what the music is, I always tell people, if you envision a racetrack and there's 5 guys and, these are the musicians and 5 cars, and the light goes green and it's pedal to the metal, full blown, everybody's just going crazy the entire time. That's Flotsam and Jetsam. And somehow, musically, I don't understand how it works, because I'm just putting in everything in the kitchen sink. The guitar players are playing all kinds of crazy stuff. The bass player's playing a million notes, and the singer's singing all this crazy stuff. And somehow it's musical, and it ends up sounding like a song, and it really fits together, and it works. And we don't even really understand how that happens.
What a great descriptive journey you just took us on, because in listening to you guys, I mean, that's it. That's perfect. I don't know how you keep up personally with all the stuff you're doing. I mean, look at some of the videos and everything. I mean, it's awesome stuff.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to worry about exercising. You just play go on tour with the band, and you probably lose 10 pounds or something. I mean, that's
absolutely
just crazy.
Yeah, a 90-minute show with Flotsam and Jetsam is like jogging for 90 minutes. So yeah, when I get done, I am just completely just drenched in sweat. And I've never worked in a band that was this much energy required, from the drums. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. But, you deliver on it. I mean, I'm amazed when I see some of the stuff you guys are doing. It's amazing. It's very cool. But it also has a vibe to it.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Hey, people that may be watching us right now, or they'll hear the podcast later, so many. I mean, I have a student. One of my students is, in fact, I just connected you guys, and he's amazing. I mean, he plays drums, guitar, bass. He writes songs. He sings. Very talented high school student. And, we talk about, I don't know the business like you do, because I'm not in that end of it. I do the performing and recording or whatever, but I'm not doing all the production and stuff. I don't have the backlog that you do. Talk to that person who's catching the show right now and says, I want to do this. I mean, I've got these songs. I want to release them. I got to record them. What advice do you have for that person who says, this is me, this is my heartbeat?
Well, I think if you're really passionate about music, then you have to do it. I think in the current environment, if you're not super passionate about it and you don't love it, I would not recommend it.
Okay.
For people that, it's not like a burning desire in them to do this, because it is a very difficult industry. There's a tremendous amount of competition. I mean, so much. I Googled the other day that every day there's 3.7 million videos uploaded to YouTube. 3.7 million every day. So,
that's crazy.
So if you think about, you're trying to get a slice of this audience, and every day there are more and more videos that are kind of making that more and more difficult. Also with Spotify, I learned that they are uploading, I thought it was 40,000 songs a day. It turns out it's 100,000 songs a day are being uploaded to Spotify. So
that's crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, if you think of just the volume of stuff, my advice is to, do music that moves you, that you feel excited about, that you feel super strongly about, that moves you personally. And I think if it moves you personally, I've been involved in a lot of records that seem to have stood the test of time. I was doing interviews this morning in Chile for, Fifth Angel records that, a couple of them were made, 36 years ago or whatever.
Wow.
And we're still talking about those records today.
That's crazy.
It is. I mean, it's so I think the one thing I will say is that, the one thing I learned in Fifth Angel, and, that's my first, band, I learned that you do things right and you will never be upset with doing them right. You will only be upset with doing something incorrectly, or you didn't take the time to make a great record, or you didn't take the time to make a great song. Take the time to be excellent at what you do, because that makes the difference. It really does. Because there's so many people that are willing to just take it halfway and, it's good enough. And, I'm going to throw this out there. But I think if you want to stand the test of time and you want to, record music that people are going to still be talking about, 30 years later, it takes some effort and it takes some thought and it takes, you do have to have a passion about it too. So I think do music, the best advice I can give is, if your heart is super into it, you have to do it. Make sure you're making music that moves you and is exciting to you. And then hopefully you find an audience that feels the same way. Because I can't tell you how many bands I've produced where, we're in the middle of tracking an album and they have a song and they go, well, we're going to record this song. We really don't like this one. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Like, you don't like the song. If you don't like the song, why should anybody else like the song?
Exactly.
If you don't like the song, don't record it.
You know what? That's great advice. And that whole thing of being committed to excellence and doing it right. I was thinking about the last session I did, and it's kind of weird because I hate the word pivot because we heard that too much during COVID, but I just added something that wasn't a big, for me, it's always been the kit. And now I'm doing a lot of hand percussion work as well. And it was interesting being in the studio and having the producer say, okay, well, let's do this now. Can you give us a little bit more of this? And then, having produced all this stuff you have, but it's doing it the right way. And for me, again, go back to learning experience, because this wasn't always a main thing for me. Not that it's the main thing now, but it's a big part of what I'm doing, both live and in the studio, and doing it right. I think that commitment is missing in our culture today.
I think so, a little bit. I mean, I think especially in young people where, for instance, the game Guitar Hero, where kids were getting good at playing a video game and all of a sudden, they thought they were great guitar players and then they got on a real guitar and they're like, oh, crud, this is nothing like actually playing a guitar and I can't actually play guitar. Oh, you mean I have to really practice to be good at this? And, I think that really, it really serves as a deterrent for a lot of young people. But I agree with you. I think today in today's world, it's very easy for people to want that instant gratification. And if you're going to be great, if you're going to be a great singer, you're going to be a great drummer or a great guitar player or a great bass player or a great writer or a great producer or a great director in film, like whatever it is you're going to be, artist, it requires a lot of commitment and it requires a lot of hours and it requires a great deal of effort. Take the time to be excellent at it, and that's what it takes to succeed in this business now.
Well, and you use the word, if you're passionate about it, then that should motivate you to want to do it right and to do it well. I like what you said too earlier about if it moves you, then chances are it's going to move an audience. In fact, we had somebody on the show, a few months ago who competed at Alice Cooper's, I'm trying to think of what the competition was called, something about the plum. You probably remember that.
Christmas pudding, maybe the Christmas pudding contest?
Something like that.
Yeah, because they pick one band that actually gets to perform at the official Christmas pudding, which is usually at a theater like Celebrity Theater, and
nice.
The band gets to play there. So yeah, I was actually a judge for some of that. So
I think this was different. She was one of, several people that competed, and I forget how high she got, but she actually came on the show, and I love what she's doing. Songs.
Are you talking about the artist plum? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I didn't know that she came from the Alice Cooper Did she came from something to do with Alice's foundation?
Yes, she did. I don't know. I don't know that she took lessons there, but I know she competed there.
Okay. Right.
And she's great. She's got a great heart. She's very passionate about what she's doing. She's really trying to learn her craft and develop. And we've had her on the show. And Jack, I like that.
Jack says it was the Christmas pudding. So that's Jack just made that comment. So he probably knows. Let's go with that. I'm sure.
All right, Jack, thank you for correcting us there, or said I knew it had something to do with pudding or something like that, and obviously it was at Alice's foundation. So a very cool deal. Now, before we lose time, I want to hear from you. You were, if I've got this right, you were playing with the House of Lords, and something happened that caused a bit of a change in the direction of your career. What happened?
Are you talking about like the back issues that I had? Yeah. I was starting to have, after House of Lords, I was starting to have some pretty severe back problems, and I would be recording in the studio, And, I would finish with, let's say, session sometimes takes, 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes longer. And I would get up from the drum stool and it would be really difficult for me to walk. So that sort of changed my, for a long time, I didn't really understand how to deal with it. Now I deal with it. There's for all the young drummers out there, I'm going to recommend a drum throne called the Rock and Sock Motion Throne. It's expensive. It's about $400, but it actually moves as you're playing, and your back is not fixed in one position. My back actually feels like after I sit down and play drums on that motion throne, my back actually feels better. So, like, I can play now for 10 hours, and
that's
I'm not
amazing.
Affected. But back then, we didn't have that, and I didn't really know how to combat that. And so it did sort of push me in a different direction. I really got into production and writing and even singing. I put out a project called Soul Shock Remedy. And so I kind of, moved in a different direction for a long time. And then, once I sort of figured out how to adjust, to that back issues, I went through physical therapy. I think, certainly your diet even affects things. People don't understand, like even things like sugar. Like I try to stay away from sugar as much as possible because I know it sounds funny, but it can cause inflammation in your joints and in your back.
Sure.
And so once I kind of cut out sugar and I found that Rock and Sock Motion Throne and went through some physical therapy, now I seem to be able to drum and not have the same issues. But there was a time where I was having really severe issues, and that did make me change direction as far as my career.
Interesting that you mentioned Rock and Sock. I don't have the Motion Throne, but I do have a Rock and Sock
and also
throne.
The one with the back on it. The back is very important.
Yes.
But the thing I love about the Motion Throne is that, on a regular drum throne, you're just sitting there and your back is always fixed and it's in a fixed position. And I don't know any drummer that's been doing it a long time, whether it's Dean Castronova or Eric Singer, any guy that's been playing drums for, 20, 30 years, 40 years, whatever, everybody has back problems. So if you're young and you're watching this, go out. It's expensive, but in 20 years, you're going to thank me. So,
I know it's worth it.
And you don't think about it when you're young.
No,
I didn't. Like when you're young, you think, hey, this body, I can do whatever and nothing's going to hurt it ever. And, it's something that as you get older, you start finding out, you have to really, do your best to take care of it.
And whether it's having the proper equipment or the proper diet and exercising, whatever it happens to be, you've got to. I've started a couple months ago being serious about walking, and I've been carrying weights with me when I walk. And, I'm gradually increasing that weight, and it's good for your core. I'm losing weight. I'm getting more energy. And I mean, it's just a good thing to put it all together. A word comes to me, attitude, because I'm sitting there thinking we all are going to run into something in our life that's going to cause us to change direction, maybe temporarily, maybe permanently. And in our career, a different path. Is it about attitude, Ken?
Well, one thing I did, I talked to Steve Smith one time, and I'm trying to remember what problem he had. I don't know if it was a shoulder or something, but he just, wouldn't accept it. He just found his way around the mountain, so to speak. Yeah. And I think attitude is very important. I mean, I think you certainly do whatever you can to improve your situation and hopefully overcome your situation. But I do agree with you. Sometimes life throws you, different circumstances. And sometimes they're not always pleasant, but I think the attitude is very important. I mean, I think if you're trying to find a way around the mountain, like for me, I never gave up. I found that drum stool. I went through physical therapy. I did what I needed to do to try to overcome the situation. So I think, whatever the limitation is that you're experiencing, like you said, maybe it's going to change a direction completely. Maybe it's something that can't be overcome, but certainly you should try and do your best to alleviate the situation. And, just like I mentioned, Steve Smith, and again, I don't remember what the ailment was, but, he basically just wouldn't accept it. And he just kept, he kept working through it and eventually overcame it. So I think the attitude is very important.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I guess it's attitude. It really is attitude. Hey, thanks for taking the time out of a crazy busy schedule I can't thank you enough. I know
Anything
you're
for you,
busy.
Steve, always.
Well, Ken, I appreciate that, and back at you with that too. I mean, I always enjoy the time we have together. Once again, give us social media handles so we can follow you.
Instagram is going to be Ken K. Mary Official, and Facebook is going to be Ken Mary 1. Or there's Ken K. Mary as well on Facebook. And but I'm a little more active on Ken Mary 1. And that's the number 1 again, just because, again, drums are number 1.
Drums are number 1.
Drums are number 1. Drums are number 1.
You know what? I can't let you go without saying this because I thought about it earlier. We got to come up with a product line. Drums are number 1.
Drums are number 1, yeah.
Hats, hoodies, and then we'll say, hey, it was all birthed during this conversation.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks, man. Take care of yourself, and I'll look forward to the next time we have to chat and get together.
Sounds great, Steve.
This is Utalk Radio.